Hi friends, it's Miss Margaret from Great Salt Bay School, and I'm going to be working with Miss Leslie from the Farm's Kitchen at the Y again this week. We're going to be talking about making fresh salsa to go with your quesadillas or anything else you might have salsa with. And the three plants I'm going to talk to you about today are onions, tomatoes, and cilantro. So I'm going to start with onions. Onions take a really long time to grow, and I seeded them from this tiny seed way back in early March when we were still all in school. So I started them very beginning of the month of March, and this is what they look like now. So they're still pretty small. I'm going to show you. This is what a baby onion looks like. It's almost like a blade of grass in some ways, and it's got the roots here and the green top. And when I put it into the ground, which I can do anytime now, these can stand a little bit of cool weather. They'll grow over the course of the summer. It'll probably be August before we would start to be able to think about harvesting. And one fun fact about onions is that it's actually the length of the day, so how much daylight they get, that causes the bulb to form, that makes the onion at the base of the root where that's the part that we eat. So it doesn't start to form that bulb until it's signaled by the length of the day to do that. And for each variety of onion, it can be different. So when we eat the onion, we're eating the part that forms right where the root is, just underground. Okay, and here's a small onion just so you can see. This is where the roots grow, and this is where the green tops would be, and this is the part we eat. Okay, and so the next thing is tomatoes. I want to show you tomato seed. Oops. So tomato seeds, there's lots of different varieties of tomatoes. There's cherry tomatoes and slicing tomatoes and tomatoes called paste that we use for making sauces. And tomatoes really like warm weather. So the tomatoes I would not plant outside yet, so I have them in my greenhouse. So this is a tomato seedling, and I started it a few weeks ago. It's still pretty small. Right now, tomatoes are probably going to need some more time inside, warm and cozy, before they can go out. It's a little bit cool for them. Usually I'd plant them the end of the end of May or early June in the ground. And most of you probably know this, but when we eat the tomato, we're eating the fruit of the plant. So when we cut that tomato open, we see seeds inside, and that's a good way to remember what part that is. That the fruit is the house of the seeds. So tomatoes take quite a while to grow to where they have fruit, and then so we wouldn't harvest this plant and the fruit on it probably until August. Okay, and then the last thing is cilantro. Cilantro and tomatoes and fresh onions make a really yummy salsa that you can have with quesadillas or anything that you would eat with salsa. And we like to add a little lime and salt with it too. This is an herb called cilantro right here. And it's still a little bit cool outside to have that in the garden, but pretty soon. Cilantro, we eat the leafy part right here. And it's an herb that's used in Mexican cooking a lot. And we usually don't let it flower, but when it does flower, the seed it forms looks like this. And and coriander, which is the seed, is also used in cooking sometimes. But that's how we start the plant, and is sometimes also used as its own spice. So that's all I have for you today, and I think I'm going to pass it on to Leslie, and she is going to show you how to make that salsa fresca, and you can enjoy it maybe at home. And if you have any questions about any of these vegetables, I'm always happy to answer them, so send them my way. So I'm going to pass my onion on to Leslie, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Thanks for the onion, Margaret. Let's head into the kitchen and make some salsa. Hi everyone, now we're in the kitchen. I'm Leslie from Farms at the Y, and we are going to make a salsa to use all those awesome vegetables that Margaret showed us. So we've got cilantro, all grown in a nice bunch. We've got a tomato. We've got an onion. And we also have in our salsa today some garlic and a lime. All of those things can grow in Maine except the lime. Now, it is early in the season for tomatoes. Like you saw, Margaret's little tomato seedling doesn't have any fruit on it yet. In the warmer weather and late in the summer, we'll have our tomatoes. I'm using a tomato that was grown in Maine, but it was grown inside where it's nice and warm. So the salsa recipe is really lots of just chopping and a little bit of juicing. So let's get started. For the tomato, I'm going to use a serrated knife. And as you can see, the serrated knife has those teeth on it, so it's good for cutting with that back and forth motion. I'm going to use my bear claw to tuck my fingers and make sure they're safe. And I've got my cutting board anchored under this cloth so that it doesn't go anywhere. I'm always going to keep my eyes on what I'm cutting, and I'll take my time. You can see where the stem was, the tomato has a bit of a core, so I'm actually going to cut that out. And I also don't have a nice flat side to my tomato, so I'm going to put it flat side down and start making my cuts. Now the recipe wants you to chop the tomato, and it doesn't give a specific size. So I like to think of, in the end when I'm eating my salsa, what would be a good size when I take a bite of my salsa? Do I want a big chunk of tomato or a little chunk? What'll be best? Does it have to fit on a chip, or is it going to go on some tacos? There's lots of ways to use salsa. I'm okay with a size about that big. All right, let's move on to our next ingredient. We've got our cilantro here. And so, like Margaret mentioned, the leaves of the cilantro are the parts that we eat, but you can also eat the stem. It depends how quickly you want to move through this recipe. So you can start by twisting some of it off. And if you want to, just eat the leaf. You can pull it right off like that and discard the stem. The stem can go in the compost. And if you are in a bit of a rush and you want to cut it with all the stems, I can show you how. So I'm going to put it in a pile, and you notice I'm switching to my kitchen knife with that long kind of smooth blade because I'm going to do an up and down motion. You want to make sure that you're holding your knife not too far back, nice and close to the blade. And don't bring my knife up ever. I always keep the knife tip down and just go up and down with my wrist. Now I've cut pretty close to the stem, so I'm going to pause and get rid of some of the stem pieces. And there's not much to hold on to, so I'm actually going to make sure that my cilantro is in a pile. And with the palm of my hand or pinching, I'm going to go up and down and move my knife across the pile of cilantro. And it's good to take your time when doing this. On those TV shows, those chefs move really fast. But there's no harm in going slow. I've got some cilantro stuck to my knife, so I want to push it off using a downward sweep and never up. So my cilantro started to spread out, and I can use the back of my knife to put it back in a pile. We avoid using the sharp part of the knife to scrape against the cutting board because it does dull our knife over time. And we want a nice sharp knife because a sharp knife is a safe knife. It's back in a pile, and I'm going to go back to cutting it. Let's move on to our onion. So with our onion, you're going to want to cut the top and bottom off first. And now we have a nice flat side, so we can put it flat and go right down the middle. This way we can take off that papery outside that we don't want. Now my onion started to sprout a little bit, so it has this thick white part in the middle, which I'm going to remove. Now that I have a flat side, I can put it right on it And if your eyes do start to water or start to sting while you're cutting an onion, you can always pause, go over to the sink and run your water over cold water, and that'll help. Sometimes breathing out of my mouth and not my nose helps me, but it does kind of make you sound like you have a cold. Once I get my onions into these nice kind of rainbow shaped pieces, I'm going to put them in a pile, and I'm going to do the same technique I did with the cilantro, where I can either pinch or put a palm on the knife, and I'm gently going up and down and moving across the pile of onions. I don't want a big chunk of onion in my salsa because that might be a little too spicy. Brushing the stuff stuck on. And I'm going to put it again into a smaller pile there and continue working across it. Next, let's do our garlic. So this is the clove of the garlic that came off the whole bulb. And the garlic is similar to the onion in that it has a papery outside, and we want to remove that before we use it. You can either use the palms of your hands to push down and crush it, or if you're comfortable, you can use your large kitchen knife and give it a little whack. And by crushing it, it's a lot easier to take off that papery outside. There's also a little end to the garlic, which is tough, and we want to cut that off first. So the recipe calls for mincing our garlic, which is a small cut. So we want this garlic into tiny pieces. Once the garlic is too small for me to hold, I'm going to readjust. Got a little bad spot on my garlic, so I'm going to cut that off. Looks like it goes through pretty deep. There we go. And now I can move my garlic into a pile because it's so small that I can't get my fingers in, and do the same palm cut or pinch cut. And the garlic's extra sticky, so I have to pause often to clean it off my knife and to get it into a nice little pile. Now we're ready for our lime. You can give your lime a nice roll to try to soften it. And I'm going to use the serrated knife because the skin can be a little tough on that. There it is. If you don't have a juicer, there's lots of ways to juice your lime. You can just use your hands to squeeze it and juice it. I have a juicer that looks like this, which you put in with the cut side down and squeeze it. You can also use a pair of tongs and just push it into the middle and squeeze with your hands like that. So our salsa is almost ready. We just need to give everything a stir to combine it. Add a little salt and a little bit of pepper. It's ideal if the salsa can sit for a little bit just to get all those flavors mixing together. But this is a perfect snack or can go with any meal. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thanks to Miss Margaret for everything. We hope to see you soon.